Hello and welcome to Alaska's Political Pipeline. I'm political reporter Wil Courtney. On Monday, lawmakers held a hearing on the activity of Immigration and Customs Enforcement in Alaska. I got the chance to speak with several lawmakers after the meeting, including Representative Andrew Gray. He's the chair of the House Judiciary Committee that held this hearing. But first, I'm going to do something a little bit different. This hearing came after the state saw a notable deportation we broke last week. So before we go to the lawmakers, we're going to start today's episode with what we know about that deportation. With that, let's go to investigative reporter Augusta McDonald.
It is a story that has received a lot of attention, many reactions. A mother and her 3 children taken into ICE custody in Soldotna earlier this week. 3 of the 4 quickly deported back to Mexico just a day later. Augusta McDonald has been following this story very close and joins us now with the latest. Augusta.
John, thanks so much. Sonia Esperanza Arriaga came into the U.S. in 2023 along with 2 of her children. She's really at the center of the story. She declared herself at the border, legally seeking U.S. asylum from domestic and gang violence in Mexico at that time. But after missing an immigration court date in January, she received a notice of removal. She says her mistake was misinterpreting the date because it was written in English. We talked to Sonia by phone today from Jalisco, Mexico. Her husband, Alexander, who's a U.S. citizen, helped to translate.
As soon as she missed the hearing and there was the notice of removal sent, that means that she could be deported. So did she or did she not understand that?
I can go ahead and answer this because I was there when we spoke with our attorney when we hired the firm. They said that this letter to continue to live our life as we were, go to work, all that, and that it's there might be that this could possibly happen, and if and when it happened, to contact them, so therefore they can go with the next steps. So, in reference to that question, yes, but we were assured that the process would be different.
Augusta, can you tell us, is there anything out of the ordinary about this case when it comes to legal standing?
It's interesting, John, because the family does acknowledge the error in missing their court date, and they truly believed they were doing what was legally required to reopen that case within a 90-day window. The family's attorney says the law does allow for such arrests. The only nuance we can confirm at this point here is how quickly things transpired in this case.
In general, you have a 90-day timeline in which to file a motion to reopen after that order. But the order, ICE can effectuate the order in general.
But it's not a guarantee, like you will get 90 days and then you will be deported.
No, there's no stay of the government's ability to remove someone during that time period.
Gotcha. All that said, are you surprised by how quickly this went?
Yes. It was very fast. We are very far away from Mexico here, and that was incredibly swift. The federal government usually is slow moving in general.
The rapid speed of this deportation and others across the U.S. in recent months might signal a change in the pace of work for immigration attorneys. John?
And Augusta, what's the latest on Sonia's 3rd son, arrested, detained here in Anchorage locally?
Yes, John, 18-year-old Alexis Arriaga was not deported by ICE with his family, but instead placed in the Anchorage jail earlier this week. And we just learned today, Friday, he's been transferred to the Tacoma Northwest ICE Processing Center, which is typically where ICE detainees that are arrested in Alaska eventually go. We're still trying to figure out, though, why he was separated from the others. We've repeatedly reached out to ICE spokespeople to find out more about the Arriaga's case, but we haven't received a response. We do have an extended version of this story on all of the events of this week right now on our webpage.
Thanks, Augusta. So it's with that specific instance in mind that we go to this hearing where lawmakers asked what they can do to support immigrants seeking citizenship. And immigrants' rights activists said hearings like this one, speaking out against ICE actions, were sufficient. There was no representative for DHS or ICE at the hearing, though Representative Gray said he had been in communication. He gave them until Friday to respond to questions they asked ICE. One person in the group of advocates was Allison Flack. She's the parent of a friend of the 5-year-old who was deported. Speaking virtually, this was her message to lawmakers.
I'm here, Allison Flack. I'm here to speak as a scared mother. Matthias was one of ours. My daughter is a kindergarten student and classmate of Matthias, Sonia's 5-year-old son. In the beginning of the year, they were desk mates. My daughter would come home every day telling me about her new friend and how quiet he was because he didn't yet speak English. I thought about how scary that must be for him and his mom, how worried I was about my own little girl starting kindergarten and being out on her own all day. What if she had a bully? What if she had trouble in school? What if she got in trouble at school? So many worries. And I'm certain Sonia had all those same worries, but tenfold. As the years gone on, I've seen a different light come into that little boy's eyes. Last time I was in the classroom, it was so obvious what strides he has made and how hard he has worked to make those strides. He was flourishing. I got to work with him and 3 other students playing a spelling game. It was chaos. All the kids were horsing around and in Valentine party mode, but not Matthias. He was paying attention to me. He was working so hard. He was following my instructions and sounding out his words. I could tell how proud he felt. I walked out of there that day on a high as well, texting another one of the classroom moms about how excited I was and how in awe of him I was. He was so rapidly catching up to these kids who have been speaking English their entire lives. It was really, really wonderful to witness. It became clear to me that Matthias has family, teachers, and friends who love him and want him to succeed in school and in our community. Last Tuesday, my child came home and told me about her day. Pretty typical kindergarten stuff, who she played with on the playground, what they had for lunch. They played spiders and flies in PE. She mentioned that her friend Matthias was gone from school, but they've all been sick, so I thought he just caught what they all had. Later in the evening, though, I saw an article about a mother and her 3 children being deported from Soldotna, and I immediately got a lump in my throat. I was frantically searching our class roster. I didn't know Sonia. I only know Matthias. I didn't know her name, but when I saw it there below his name, it was terrible, and I knew that they had our boy. Not only was I surprised to see ICE activity in my state, but that they would involve children in that action was truly shocking to me. Not only the 5-year-old, there's also a 16-year-old, Christopher, and 18-year-old Alexis, who may legally be an adult, but he's only 18 as well. Parents all started texting each other, poring over any news we could find and sharing information in rapid fire, all just needing to know where he was and if he was safe. Knowing he was terrified after having read the news account of how that was done, clearly not taking into account the trauma that they were inflicting on those children. None of us slept that night, showing up at school the next day with red-rimmed eyes, feeling panic and uncertainty and needing to know how we could help. I used to feel like we knew how to keep our children and our community members safe. We knew the laws. We could trust that our leadership would follow those laws. We were told that only the worst of the worst were going to be deported. That was clearly a lie. Sonia and her children moved here on asylum, fleeing violence. She was doing everything she could to keep her family safe. She was giving them a good life in our community. She was working, her children were working. The lice, or the activity that's happened in the last few months has completely shaken the trust I have. We're all now faced with the decision of what to tell our children. Should I tell her that he moved and just hope and pray that she doesn't find out the truth? Our state is better than this. I don't want to tell my daughter that the grown-ups have done something so terrible, the ones she's supposed to be able to trust. If we're kept up at night hoping and praying that our children don't find out the truth about the cruel activities of their government, aren't we doing something wrong? And that's the end of my testimony.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
After the hearing wrapped up, I got the chance to speak with 3 lawmakers. And in order of appearance, I got the chance to chat with Representative Justin Ruffridge. He's the Republican Minority Whip out of Soldotna, Representative Ted Eichscheid, an Anchorage Democrat, and Chair of the House Judiciary Committee, Representative Andrew Gray. Let's take a listen. Your thoughts, Representative?
Well, I appreciate Representative Gray for holding that hearing. I think it's something that folks in Alaska really want to hear about and know what's happening. So I think there's a lot of work to still be done and a lot of questions still be answered. So looking forward to hearing that.
And yourself and Representative Kopp had similar questions about what's next. What's the solutions that you're coming out of this? Do you feel like you got those questions answered today?
Well, not fully. I think there's a lot of work my office is going to keep doing on that issue. I think we heard it from Representative Gray at the end that there needs to be a call for, I think, a wholesale reform and something that we can look at and say, we know for certain this is the path forward. And right now, I think a lot of people have a lot of questions.
And what would you like to see next for the Judiciary Committee on this issue?
I'm looking forward to hearing from our federal agencies, so that's what I'll be looking for.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Appreciate your time. Representative,
Yes, I'm sorry?
do you have any thoughts on the meeting today?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
It was very disturbing. Learned some new things. You know, there's a long history of this. I guess that was my question from the first Trump administration. You know, we all want to follow the law, but we also want our government to follow the Constitution. I'm not sure they are. It's very disturbing no matter what part of the political spectrum you fall on. Separating families and traumatizing children is never right.
What was your reaction to when you heard about the news?
I was shocked. You know, I've been following what's happened in Minnesota pretty closely, and I thought, holy cow, here it is in Alaska. You know, I represent Northeast Anchorage. I have a lot of folks who English is not their primary language. And I know what fear is. I don't think people living here should live in fear. People working in our communities, people who are our neighbors, people who go to our schools. I don't like it.
And Representative Gray said a resolution's on the way about this issue, about what the federal delegation should do on this issue. What would you like to see coming out of this this committee, whether it's investigative or looking for more research, looking for more testimony? What would you like to see next?
I think it's important that we shine a light on this issue. And I think it's also really important we push our federal delegation to fix this problem. The buck has to stop somewhere. And immigration reform has not been dealt with, and it's their job to fix this broken system.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate your time. Representative Gray, thanks for your time and for letting us be in on the hearing, obviously quite long and comprehensive. I want to start, I have a couple questions for you, but I want to start with a response we got from ICE today about Sonia Espinoza-Arriaga. And I'm just going to read it to you. Sonia Espinoza-Arriaga, an illegal alien from Mexico, and her children were issued a final order of removal as a family unit January 13th after she failed to show up for her immigration court hearing. ICE located and arrested Espinoza in Soldotna, Alaska on February 17th during a targeted vehicle stop. Espinoza is now facing the consequences of making the decision to not follow that lawful order to report to ICE. Upon Espinoza's request, ICE ensured that her family remained unified and brought the entire family unit to ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations Field Office in Anchorage for processing. At no time were the children separated from their mother while in ICE custody. Although Espinoza's 19-year-old son was processed as an adult, he was able to remain with them until he was transported to a detention facility. ICE does not separate families. Parents are given a choice to either take their minor children with them or place them in the care of someone they designate. This is consistent with past administration immigration enforcement. Representative, your thoughts on that statement?
Well, I think what jumps out at me is that they kept her, they said he was 19. It was my understanding that he was 18. The 18-year-old son was separated and is currently still in a detention facility in the U.S. So I have a lot of questions about that separation. Obviously, I'm hearing this statement for the first time. I said on the record that I didn't understand the facts behind why she was detained and about the potential missed hearing. So I'm obviously not an immigration attorney, so I'd like to learn more about that. But what we did hear from Alora Mukherjee from Columbia University in the hearing is that she's never seen a deportation happen this fast. That's a very unusual situation. So I think that, coupled with the fact that Sonia Arriaga married her husband, American citizen, born in Seward, Alaska, fairly recently. You know, there are options available for applying for green cards once you have a U.S. husband. I don't know how far along in that they were. Obviously, we didn't have her attorneys here speaking for her. We weren't able to ask those kinds of legal questions. But I would say that the statement from ICE doesn't necessarily answer the questions and doesn't explain why this particular family in Soldotna, Alaska, which Per testimony that we heard today, was legally working, living here with her kids, newly married, was suddenly picked up and then transported out of the country at lightning speed.
So can you tell me a little bit about what the outreach to ICE has been? You said you have a few questions. You want answers by Friday. What are those questions?
So I have a list of questions, but essentially, off the top of my head, a lot of folks have been saying that we've never seen minors detained by ICE. So first and foremost, are we getting that correct? Has ICE detained minors in the past? If so, how are ICE detaining minors in Alaska? Is there a plan going forward to detain minors in Alaska? How will we facilitate that, since we don't have any sort of facility for families in Alaska? We asked lots of detail. It's quite a few questions. We asked some detailed questions about, what that would look like. And I think that's the major concern, not just of me, but of my constituents and other folks in this building. Has ICE changed their policy? If we've never detained a minor before, how are we going to be doing that going forward, and what's that going to look like, and how do we know that those children are not going to be traumatized? And that really brings up the whole situation when they say that she missed this removal hearing, this important removal hearing, and then that's what preempted all of this. Well, ICE was founded in 2003, and 23 years has no one in Alaska ever missed that hearing before. And did those kids get detained and immediately deported at lightning speed? That's a question that I think we want to have, because I think this is an unusual case, not something that we've seen before. And I think we need further explanation than that statement we just heard from them.
You mentioned when you were concluding this hearing today that there have been people that have maybe criticized you a little bit about why are we having this hearing? This is obviously a federal issue largely, but to your point, these are people in Alaska that are being impacted. So maybe while it's a federal government issue, it's an Alaska person issue. Can you tell me a little bit about the criticisms you've been hearing about this hearing and what your kind of reaction to that is?
Sure. Well, when we got the information that a family had been detained in Soldotna with children, the question that we had in our office was, should we sort of stand back and watch and see what happens and maybe see if the policy has changed and we're going to start seeing a lot more children being detained? And I think our office's consensus was, we don't want to wait for more kids to be detained. We want to shine a light on this now. A 5-year-old, you heard from the mother of another kindergartner, who was the desk mate of the youngest child, Matthias. I think this child was removed from kindergarten. We have that issue. I think we wanted to address it right away. So from the very beginning, I knew that I was going to get criticism, but the bottom line is DOC is involved. DOC is a state agency. DPS says that they're not involved, that they don't participate, but we do have some cooperation. Actually, let me ask my lawyer, my staff. Do we know those 287Gs, those agreements with local law enforcement? Do we know if Soldotna's local law enforcement was participating in an agreement?
We don't know. Our information is no regarding Soldotna, but we have not confirmed that. Our information right now, which again we still need to confirm, is that Kodiak, though, is.
Okay.
And that there may be one other municipal.
Okay. So the bottom line is that we do know that there are some municipalities in Alaska where their local law enforcement has entered in an agreement with ICE. And so that makes it not a federal issue. That makes it a local issue. And, on the one hand, yes, there have people who have criticized me and said, this is a federal issue, stand back, stand down. We've gotten a jillion emails from folks who are thankful that we're having this hearing, thankful that we're asking these questions, and have absolute concerns that they do not want Alaska to look like what we're seeing in the lower 48.
From what I kind of saw today looked to be, and you tell me if I'm off base, but this looked to be like kind of laying the foundation for future meetings, that like this is how immigration statuses work, and this is what my experience in Columbia kind of teaches me about this. So tell me a little bit about what's next for this committee. Are there going to be more hearings about the ICE activity, or?
Well, what I would say is that today's hearing is part of a series of hearings that we've been holding since I became chair. So we had a hearing last year about the labyrinthine maze that is the U.S. immigration system. We had multiple entities testify back then about how difficult it is for folks to navigate the system. And we heard Ms. Mukherjee talking about temporary protected status. We've talked a lot about that with the Ukrainians coming to Alaska, thousands of Ukrainians coming to Alaska on this temporary type of status that was then paused by President Trump, thus leaving lots of folks in Alaska, skilled workers doing jobs, suddenly without work permits. We've been asking those questions for a long time. And then we also held that hearing back in June of 2025 with DOC about the detention of the 40 folks from Washington State that were shipped up for Anchorage Correctional Complex to take care of, which I think uncovered a lot of the differences between the traditional incarcerated population and ICE detainees. ICE detainees, civil detainment. You know, if you go to Germany and you have a tourist visa and you overstay it, you don't get arrested and put in jail. Like, you know, and it's the same thing here. If you have overstayed your visa, if your work permit has expired, that doesn't get you locked in jail. And yet what we're seeing, at least with the 18-year-old in this case, is, you know, he was taken to the Anchorage Correctional Complex in handcuffs was the report that we got, that he was handcuffed and taken there and then transported to this other detention facility in Washington State. I mean, he moved here when he was 16 years old. He hasn't committed any crimes. So there are real concerns about the way we are treating folks and the way our state entities are managing those folks. And actually, those questions are not for the federal government. Those questions are for legislators to be asking their state entities how they're doing it.
Two more questions for you. Tell me a little bit about what you want the outcome of these hearings to be.
If you were to say, what's your biggest hope? My biggest hope is that we don't see any more children detained by ICE in Alaska. I mean, and that is something that I'm not really sure I should say on the record, but I will say is that, you know, we want folks to know that Alaskans are not going to tolerate this, and that to hopefully, if ICE was thinking about detaining any more children, we hope that hearings like this give them pause to say, hey, Alaskans do not want this. We're not going to tolerate this. Don't do it.
And then my last question for you, I don't know if you've gotten the chance to speak with Ms. Arriaga yet, but if you have any message to her family, what's that message?
Well, the message is that we're thinking of her and her family and that we want the best for them. And we want to find a path. If there is a path for them coming back to Soldotna, we would like to help make that path possible. I will say for the record that we did reach out to her family to ask for participation, you know, and I totally understand why they maybe didn't want to participate in the hearing, but we did reach out and attempt to invite them to participate in the hearing in any way that they felt comfortable.
Sir, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Alaska's Political Pipeline. If you like what you listen to, consider following the podcast and giving us a review. We'll be back in your feeds next week, but until then, please take care.